Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us for today's session, which is Ransomware as a Service, a CISA threat intelligence brief. And we have a combination of council members here today. The Compliance and Risk Council is the official one hosting this, but I know we have some technology council members out there, probably some operations and member experience council members, and perhaps some folks from other areas, because ransomware is something that touches a lot of the credit union and unfortunately makes a mess for our members. So something we definitely need to spend some time thinking about. Now, my name is Lucinda Athan. I'm here on council staff, and I'm just going to go over a few logistical things, remind you of some upcoming events, and then I'll hand it off to our moderator and our speakers. So coming up, reminder that you as a council member do have access to all of our virtual roundtables, whether they're sponsored by your council or not. They are for your eyes only. Everything we have is member only, but you can see we've got some very interesting things coming up. We've got one on deposit growth. I'm doing a community tour next week, one on workplace and leadership assessments. That one is not only good for your own personal development, but for your team development. We're bringing in a career coach to talk about things like Big Five and Strength Finder and Enneagram and how you can utilize these for your personal growth. Turning around a tough member, that's a great one for the operations folks. How do you take that hot and heavy member and turn them into someone who loves you? And we have a session on DEI that the marketers are putting on. So if any of those are of interest to you, please sign up. We also have a couple council conferences coming up this fall of interest, Compliance and Risk Councils and the Technology and Operations and Member Experience Council ones, both happening the end of September. And we also do a live chat bi-monthly for each council. I know one for compliance risk is coming up pretty soon, and the tech council just had one yesterday. So keep an eye on the event calendar for that, and I highly recommend that you register. It's a great way to interact with your peers across the country. Brief note on how to interact today. So we have a couple different options in our webinar room. The chat button is something you can use to talk to each other. And the Q&A button is a great place to put your questions for either Ethan or John. You can do that while they're speaking or at the end, if something burning comes up with you, and then we'll stop and do a Q&A with each speaker. So I do encourage you to take advantage of this time. We've brought these professionals to you not only to share their expertise, but to help address questions that you might bring up. So now I will get out of the way and introduce you to Jackie Gilbert. She is SVP of Enterprise Risk over at Suncoast in Florida. She is also on the executive committee for the Compliance and Risk Council and chairs our member resources committee. So very busy woman. Jackie, I will hand it off to you.
All righty. Thank you so much, Lucinda. So hello to everyone. I am super excited about having everybody here today because I think we're going to have a very informative conversation around ransomware. I get the privilege to introduce two amazing speakers. And when I say amazing, I mean it. So let me tell you a little bit about them. Our first speaker is Mr. Ethan Bodzen, who serves as a senior intelligence analyst within the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Intelligence Division. He is a veteran of 13 years with a background of cybersecurity and all-source intelligent operations. Mr. Bodzen also spent 12 years in the United States Marine Corps, where his service was split between all-source intelligence analysis, counterintelligence, and human intelligence collections. Mr. Bodzen received his bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University, where he graduated as a National Security Agency P31 Cyber Scholar.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, that was my watch. He is currently undergoing his master's degree with concentration in emerging technology and geostrategic resources and weapons of mass destruction. So extremely excited to hear from him today. Then our second speaker is Mr. John Raymond, who serves as the Vice President of Information Security for Suncoast Credit Union. Mr. Raymond is a seasoned security executive who has over 20 years of IT and information security experience, acquired through nearly a decade of service to his country and through various positions held in the financial sector. Mr. Raymond is trained in a variety of security technologies and has been System Security Certified Practitioner since 2002 a certified information systems security professional since 2013. And then in 2018, he became the certified chief information security officer. So today they will be sharing behind the scene ransom attack and what you can do to protect your credit union against these attacks. So I stand excited and just waiting to hear from him. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bodzen.
Give me just a second here, y'all. All right, again, just want to confirm with everybody that we can see the slide deck, blue on top, white on the bottom, but not my narrative, correct?
That is
You
correct.
can indeed.
Awesome. All right, so good afternoon to everybody tuned in on the Eastern Starboard, and good morning to everybody else farther away from 5 p.m. than myself. My name is Ethan Bodzen with CISA Intelligence, and thank you very much for having me and for having us. Information provided during this brief is unclassified for official use only. Starting off, I want to standardize the term threat to establish a baseline for the rest of this brief. Threat equals intent plus capability plus opportunity. The definitions of all three listed in the bottom graphic. A legitimate defined threat must consist of all three, otherwise it simply exists as a potential threat. It's critical to separate the two because words have meaning and will serve as the benchmark for this brief moving forward. The last half of the threat formula includes threat mitigations, which is threat minus opportunity. Opportunity being the easiest of the three you yourself can control, disallowing a threat to become actualized. With threat properly defined, we move to the current approach of defining threats in today's landscape for cyber. Defining the cyber threat, it's that of a human element or human-derived, meaning cyber threats to a network refer to person or persons who attempt unauthorized access to a control system device and or network using a data communications pathway. This access can be directed from within an organization by trusted users or from remote locations by unknown persons using the internet. Threats to control systems come from numerous sources, including national governments, terrorists, industrial spies, organized crime groups, hacktivists, hackers, and inadvertent actions of an authorized user. And activities could include espionage, hacking, identity theft, crime, and terrorism. Once in a network, threat actors can steal personal identifiable information, or PII, records, proprietary information, emails, etc. Cyber threat actors aim to disrupt financial sector entities who have a low tolerance for downtime and may be experiencing resource and staffing constraints due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Cyber attacks disrupt service, deny capabilities, and degrade network integrity, and deceive organizations by concealing their acts. For communications, today's communications infrastructure is dual-faceted, combining both Internet Protocol or IP-based networks and publicly switched networks, with most corporate communication vendors moving away from publicly switched networks and continuously acquiring and enhancing their IP capabilities, like 5G. Due to technological advancement, the threat of the nation's critical civil communications and data network infrastructure closely mirrors that of the cyber threat. It's human-derived and includes the usual suspects of national governments, terrorists, and we remember what I just said. The main and arguably only thing that truly separates communications from cyber are the specific vectors used to execute an attack, which are typically hardware-based. For IP-based networks, due to their cyber nature, this threat definition is synonymous to the cyber threat, and we'll end it there. For publicly switched networks, providing your ultra-reliable, low-latency service, most network sites are not hardened against a physical attack, similar to what happened during the Christmas of 2020 Nashville, Tennessee bombing. For your physical threats, they are also dual-faceted, consisting of both a deliberate human element through the eyes of counterintelligence or counterterrorism, and a non-deliberate natural element inclusive of natural disasters or Mother Nature as a whole. And for community lifelines, which isn't necessarily financially specific, but it does include energy and the power grid, it enables the continuous operation of critical government and business functions and is essential to human health and safety or economic security. While community lifelines may not be specific targets of an attack, they are heavily intertwined within the 16 U.S. critical infrastructure sectors, which are routinely targeted, making community lifelines collateral damage. Any disruption to community lifelines by cyber or other malicious actors significantly reduced financial sector entities' ability to operate and conduct business. So the slide color key here is when you see red, the actor can and has shown this capability with success. Yellow, an actor has the capability, however, typically does not demonstrate this capability or is not proficient in it. And for green, the actor cannot or does not demonstrate this capability. Cyber threats from nation states and their surrogates will remain acute. Foreign states use cyber operations to steal information, influence populations, and damage industry, including physical and digital critical infrastructure. Although an increasing number of countries and non-state actors have these capabilities, we remain most concerned about Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, as seen on the next slide. Many skilled foreign cybercriminals targeting the United States maintain mutually beneficial relationships with these and other countries that offer them safe haven or benefit from their activity. States' increasing use of cyber operations as a tool of national power, including increasing use by militaries around the world, raises the prospect of more destructive and disruptive cyber activity. As states attempt more aggressive cyber operations, they are more likely to affect civilian populations and to embolden other states that seek similar outcomes. During the last decade, state-sponsored hackers have compromised software and IT service supply chains, helping them conduct operations, including espionage, sabotage, and potentially pre-positioning for warfighting. An example of this is a Russian software supply chain operation against a U.S.-based IT firm, exposed approximately 18,000 customers worldwide, including enterprise networks across U.S. federal, state, and local governments, critical infrastructure entities, and other private sector organizations. The actors proceeded with follow-on activities to compromise the systems of some customers, including some U.S. government agencies. For our Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT groups, Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang have demonstrated the capability and intent to advance their interests at the expense of the United States and its allies, despite the pandemic. Major adversaries and competitors are enhancing and exercising their military, cyber, and other capabilities, raising the risks to U.S. and allied forces, weakening our conventional deterrence, and worsening the long-standing threat from weapons of mass destruction. China is increasingly a near-peer competitor, challenging the U.S. in multiple arenas, especially economically, militarily, and technologically, and is pushing to change global norms. We assess that China presents a prolific and effective cyber espionage threat, possesses substantial cyber attack capabilities, and presents a growing influence threat. China's cyber pursuits and proliferation of related technologies increase the threats of cyber attacks against the U.S. homeland. Suppression of U.S. web contact that Beijing views as threatening to its internal ideological control, and the expansion of technology-driven authoritarianism around the world. We continue to assess that China can launch cyber attacks that, at a minimum, can cause localized temporary disruptions to critical infrastructure within the United States. And China's cyber espionage operations have included compromising telecommunications firms, providers of managed services, and broadly used software, and other targets potentially rich in follow-on opportunities for intelligence collection. Russia is pushing back against Washington where it can globally, employing techniques up to and including the use of force. Sorry about that. Russia is pushing back against Washington where it can globally, employing techniques up to and including the use of force. We assess that Russia will remain a top cyber threat as it refines and employs its espionage, influence, and attack capabilities. Russia continues to target critical infrastructure, including underwater cables and industrial control systems in the United States and in allied and partner countries, as compromising such infrastructure improves and in some cases can demonstrate its ability to damage infrastructure during or to cause a crisis. Russia almost certainly considers cyber attacks an acceptable option to deter adversaries, control escalation, and prosecute conflicts. Iran will remain a regional menace with broader malign influence activities. Iran's expertise and willingness to conduct aggressive cyber operations make it a significant threat to the security of U.S. and allied networks and data. Iran has the ability to conduct attacks on critical infrastructure, as well as to conduct influence and espionage activities. And lastly, we'll hit the DPRK, or North Korea, and this is going to be big for y'all, which will be a disruptive player on the regional and world stages. North Korea's cyber program poses a growing espionage, theft, and attack threat. Pyongyang probably possesses the expertise to cause temporary, limited disruptions of some critical infrastructure networks and disrupt business networks in the United States, judging from its operations during the past decade, and it may be able to conduct operations that compromise software supply chains. North Korea has conducted cyber theft against financial institutions and cryptocurrency exchanges worldwide, potentially stealing hundreds of millions of dollars, probably to fund government priorities such as its nuclear and missile programs. Let me go ahead and just double check the time that I have real quick, 12:16. Fantastic. Now that we got the, like the big strategery aspect off the board, we're going to go ahead and kick off the rest of this brief, or the meat of this brief, with cybercrime and criminal hacktivists. As a quick overview, malware or malicious software can give attackers unauthorized access and control in critical networks to cause disruption or damage. Malicious actors use ransomware, a form of malware, to encrypt and prevent access to a company's data or networks until a ransom is paid. Domestic and foreign cybercriminals routinely target and compromise public and private networks, posing a significant and chronic threat to the homeland. In 2019, U.S. victims of cybercriminal activity reported $3.5 billion in losses. Meanwhile, global economic losses for 2020 are estimated to be near $1 trillion. Cybercriminals exploit emerging technologies and significant world events as opportunities to commit crimes. For attack vectors, cybercriminals and criminal hacktivists engage in disruptive and destructive attacks against U.S. public and private networks, primarily for financial gain, while also targeting symbolic entities to support ideological positions. Ransomware remains the fastest growing cybercrime, with ransom demands in 2020 exceeding $1.4 billion US. And in addition to financial losses, ransomware victims may suffer disruption to regular operations, harm to their reputations, and loss of data. Ransomware threat actors primarily target victims with a low tolerance downtime, including manufacturing, government, information technology, health, energy, and financial entities. Ransomware tactics expanded to include double extortion, whereby criminal actors exfiltrate sensitive data prior to encryption, then threatens to release the data if the victim refuses to pay the ransom, thereby increasing pressure on victims to pay. The rise in ransomware as a service, or RAAS, as well as the availability of commodity malware on the dark web, helped fuel the increase of ransomware attacks. Intelligence suggests 64% of all ransomware attacks in 2020 came from operators using the RAAS model. RAAS follows a structure where developers offer their product to affiliates, partners, or advertisers who are then responsible for spreading the ransomware and generating infections. Developers can set certain targets for their affiliates regarding the amount of infections they need to produce, similar to a modern sales organization in the private sector. Overall, RAAS makes ransomware more accessible to a larger number of users. Sysintel assesses cybercrime and criminal hacktivist activity almost certainly will remain an enduring threat, as the potential for financial gain outweighs operational costs. Current enforcement and network defense remain incapable of keeping pace with the scale of criminal activity. Dark web marketplaces and forums providing easy access to tools from like-minded individuals, anonymity in online forums, and the use of cryptocurrency almost certainly will continue to challenge law enforcement efforts. Moving to cybercriminal organizations' enduring threat to critical infrastructure, public reporting from multiple reputable cybersecurity companies assess the cybercriminal organization responsible for TrickBot malware is likely operated by a single Russia-based group that caters to top-tier cybercriminals, including ransomware actors, as a malware-as-a-service platform. TrickBot, first identified in 2016 and originally designed as a banking Trojan to steal financial data, has evolved into a highly modular, multi-stage malware that provides its operators with a full suite of tools to conduct a myriad of illegal cyber activities. Intelligence suggests TrickBot malware command and control, or C2 servers, continue operations despite attempts in October of 2020 to dismantle the malware's infrastructure. Multiple TrickBot C2 nodes communicated with likely compromised US-based hosts following the attempted takedown, and cybercriminals leveraged TrickBot deployment on compromised victim networks in conjunction with other malware campaigns to facilitate follow-on ransomware attacks. Cybercriminals responsible for TrickBot malware development and deployment operate TrickBot infrastructure as one of the longest-lived internet botnets, in targeting multiple U.S. critical infrastructure sectors and infecting over 1 million devices around the world. TrickBot additionally acts as a modular, multi-purpose distribution platform and intrusion and reconnaissance tool for the deployment of Ryuk and Conti ransomware, reportedly operated and deployed by Russia-based cybercriminal group Wizard Spider. CISA Intel assesses the cybercriminal organization responsible for TrickBot malware almost certainly remains an enduring threat to U.S. state and local government and critical infrastructure networks, despite attempts to take down TrickBot infrastructure. Traditional name and shame measures are unlikely to deter malicious cyber activity over the long term, as exemplified by recent TrickBot activity, as cybercriminals continue to view prospects of financial gain outweighing effects of reprisal or compromise. Given the recent ransomware attacks on Colonial Pipeline and JBS Foods, we've highlighted the topic of RWS and focused on 4 of the top active RWS groups from our research and analysis. Again, the rise in RWS, as well as the availability of commodity malware on the dark web, helped fuel the increase in ransomware attacks, and reports indicate 64% of all ransomware attacks in 2020 came from operators using the RWS models. The group that topped most cybersecurity lists is Revil, aka Sodinokibi. Revil ransomware family. Oh, and by the way, so for you specifically, you'll notice that the next 4 slides, every single one of these groups out here primarily targets the financial sector. So with that, Revil ransomware group or ransomware family is linked to the Gold Southfield financially motivated threat group, active since at least 2019. First attacks by Revil were detected in early 2019 in Asia, where the malware quickly attracted the attention of experts for its technical prowess, such as its use of legitimate central processing unit or CPU functions to bypass security systems. In addition, its code contained characteristic signs of having been created for lease. The malware affected roughly 20 business sectors, the major ones located on the screen, and currently holds the record for the largest ever known ransom demand, $50 million from Acer in March of 2021. Revil is sold by criminal group Pinchy Spider, who warns victims of a planned data leak, usually via blog posts, before releasing exfiltrated data by using an automated countdown timer within the ransom note. Next, we have Conti. Conti is a RWS first observed in December of 2019. It's primarily used against major corporations and government agencies in North America whose actors steal sensitive files and information from compromised networks and threaten to publish data unless the ransom is paid. That's also going to be a common trend. Clear Sky Cybersecurity reported Conti operators might be tied to the Russian-affiliated hacking collective Wizard Spider, a financially motivated criminal group operating since at least August of 2018, which continuously improves Conti and effectively compromised over 120 victim networks. Conti's means of distribution originates with a phishing email containing a link to a Google Drive document that has the payload. Once downloaded, bizarre backdoor malware connects the victim's device to Conti's command and control server, then encrypting the victim's data. Conti uses a double extortion technique, beginning with demanding ransom in exchange for a decryption key. Conti discloses a small portion of the encrypted data and threats to release more if the ransom isn't paid. Interestingly, Conti also provides target companies cybersecurity advice on their networks in exchange for agreeing to pay the ransom. Third on our list is Lockbit. In development since at least September of 2019 and previously dubbed the .abcd virus, Lockbit is available RWS advertised to Russian-speaking users or English speakers with a Russian-speaking guarantor. Lockbit's automated vetting process intentionally avoids attacking systems local to Russia or any other countries within the Commonwealth of Independent States, presumably to avoid prosecution. Lockbit's most significant feature is its ability to self-propagate or to spread on its own using a script after manually infecting a single host. Furthermore, it hides the executable encrypting file by disguising it as the common .png image file format, further deceiving system defenses. Recently, Lockbit was enhanced with more nefarious features, including negating administrative permission checkpoints, disabling safety prompts users see when applications attempt to run as an administrator. Lockbit malware is designed to steal copies of server data and includes blackmail with ransom notes and threatens the public release of the victim's data. Lastly, we'll discuss CLOP. CLOP is associated with the threat actor group Fin11, a prolific cyber threat group with recent attacks on manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. CLOP contacts breached companies via email, offering to negotiate a payment to avoid the leak of stolen data. If the company refuses to engage, CLOP incrementally exposes it. In one case observed by FireEye at the end of 2020, Clop hackers initially demanded $20 million in an attack, and after negotiations, lowered the price to $6 million. In a separate case, hackers offered the victim a discount based on how quickly they could reach an agreement. Unlike other ransomware groups, Clop does not run in an affiliate program, running the entire operation themselves. Recent evidence suggests Clop exploits vulnerabilities in public-facing infrastructure to gain foothold within a victim network. Clop typically sends phishing lures during the work week to ensure recipients view the email and potentially infect themselves. Then, network intrusion and ransomware phases deploy near the weekend to minimize detection. No assessments on these 4 groups, just reporting. All right, I'm doing very good on time. With that, we're going to end this brief with the lasting impression of a cost-benefit outlook on paying a ransom. The increase in sophistication, targets, and frequency of attacks have led to a rise in the cost of recovery. This year, the average recovery cost is $1.85 million, and the average ransom paid was $170,404. Since the beginning of this year, ransomware attacks witnessed a rise of 57%. The active number of organizations impacted by ransomware attacks in a week surged by 102% in 2021 as compared to 2020. The Joint CISA, Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or MSISAC, ransomware guide states, quote, "Paying a ransom will not ensure your data is decrypted or that your systems or data will no longer be compromised." CISA, MSISAC, and other federal law enforcement entities do not recommend paying ransom. In addition, attackers have begun following the ransom demands to decrypt the data with follow-on extortion demands to keep data private. To improve timeliness and content of ransomware incident reports, CISA launched StopRansomware.gov, which includes a portal to report incidents. It is the #1 most viewed webpage on CISA.gov. As a vehicle to increase reporting on ransomware incidents and payments, CISA and the Treasury have been working to improve their partnership with the cyber insurance sector. Ransomware is only one of several monetization methods criminal groups use after obtaining illicit access to vulnerable networks. Some cybercrime groups engage in direct wire transfer fraud from victims or use other forms of extortion alongside or in place of ransomware. And in 2020, business email compromise, identity theft, spoofing, and other extortion schemes ranked among the top 5 most costly cybercriminal schemes according to U.S. government reporting. With my very bleak outlook on life, I guess, in general, that will conclude my brief. At this time, do I have any questions?
Yes, you do. So first of all, thank you again for the detailed information and participating on this webinar. We truly appreciate your expertise. We have a question that says, somewhat off topic, I've always wondered if there are US-based cyber attackers that target entities abroad. Is there enough activity domestically that rises to the level of state actors?
Can you repeat that question for me again? I just want to get that again. Thank you.
Are US-based cyber attackers that target entities abroad? So that's kind of question number 1. And then the next question is there enough activity domestically that rises to the level of state actors?
That may cross into murky waters. So before I say anything and get myself into any potential trouble, I will turn it over to Peter Brost, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are definitely aware and have evidence of US-based, basically cyber criminals going after locations here in the United States. I am not aware of US cyber criminals or any organized cyber group targeting entities overseas, especially at the level that would be comparable to what we're seeing from foreign state actors, those associated with foreign states, etc. So I will have to go back and review information, but currently I am not aware, I do not think we have seen evidence of a US-based group or organization conducting significant cyber efforts against entities overseas, to include friendly nations as well as adversarial nations.
All righty, great. Thank you so much. At this point, those were the only two questions that's been posted, other than they wanted to make sure that the recording was available so that they could go back through and listen to the recording to take even more notes. So definitely interesting for the attendants to re-listen to the recording, which will be available usually 2 to 3 days after the recording's done. So expect that notification to come through your email. All righty. Well, thank you, Mr. Bodzen and Mr. Bros. We appreciate your time and expertise. I want to now turn it over to Mr. Raymond.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for the warm invite, Jackie. I am excited and honored to be part of this presentation today, and I hope everyone finds the information that they're receiving to be valuable. So let's get started by defining what ransomware is and why we should all be concerned. Ransomware, as Ethan mentioned, is really just another form of malware used by threat actors to compromise a system or company. The threat actor uses encryption to prevent access to files, and they typically demand a ransom in order to restore the files. The demands are typically time-based, and if you fail to pay, they may increase the payment demands. In 2020, half of all organizations were hit with ransomware. Size of the organization doesn't matter. Incidents are both targeted attacks and crimes of opportunity, which have resulted in data being encrypted in 73% of the attacks. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're a large organization or a small organization, you're at risk of being hit with a ransomware attack. Cost for an average ransomware payment in 2020 was $312,000. I believe the presentation that Ethan stated this year was like $170,000, $180,000. The source for this information is actually taken into account the global cost, not just United States-based ransomware events. But payment demands were as high as 30 million last year. And as you saw in Ethan's report, they've jumped up dramatically, nearly double that in some cases in the past year. So we continue to see the costs increase. The demands aren't going to dissipate. And the ransomware demand is really just part of the overall financial impact. Outside of the costs that it takes to recover from an event, the ransomware payment typically doubles the cost for addressing a ransomware incident. On average, an organization spends about $622,000 to remediate a ransomware event. And if a payment is involved, that usually goes up to over 1.3 million. So obviously this is a big concern for both small and large organizations, because these costs are not easy to address. Of those organizations that were in fact infected with ransomware, 94% of them paid through cyber insurance. However, it's important to note that only 64% of organizations that have cyber insurance policies cover ransomware. So make sure that you check your policy and meet with your insurance provider to ensure that your policy covers ransomware, because in most cases, in a fair amount of cases, they don't. I believe in the State of Ransomware 2020 report from Sophos, about 72% of financial institutions' policies did cover ransomware. So that's still, nearly 30% of financial institutions that wouldn't be covered if they were actually hit with a ransomware event. In 2020, about 45% of the ransomware attacks were delivered via email. It's a combination of emails that are delivered with a malicious link or a malicious attachment. This is still the most likely vector a threat actor is going to use. An organization should focus on strengthening those email security controls. Other key areas to focus are your controls on ensuring public or internet-facing servers are well configured, protected, and most importantly, patched. Ransomware is typically taking advantage of known vulnerabilities when they infect an organization. So how can I protect my organization? First and foremost, you need to assume you're going to be breached. The odds are not in your favor. Threat actors can be wrong 99% of the time, and you still lose. All they need to be right is that one time. So make sure that you develop a formal incident response plan, assign responsibilities, and develop a strategy to recover. You can align your program with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which has 7 different phases for addressing an incident: preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident review. Your formal incident response plan should have responsibilities assigned to specific individuals within the organization, and it should have a strategy for recovering. At the end of the day, incident response is not an IT or information security only issue. It's a business continuity and recovery problem. And that needs to have business leaders involved in the decision-making process. It's not something that IT or information security can solve on their own. Make sure you communicate your plan to all staff so that they're aware of who and when to notify if they suspect an incident has occurred. Make sure that you keep your applications and operating systems patched up to date. Ransomware, as I mentioned previously, generally takes advantage of existing vulnerabilities. And if you haven't already, retire your legacy AV solutions and invest in next generation endpoint security that is designed to prevent these kind of threats, or at least help roll back to allow you to recover a lot quicker. Make sure that you segment your network, not just in your data centers, but also in the cloud as well, and encrypt sensitive information where it's being stored. Make sure that you regularly back up your systems and store backups offsite. They're going to be key to your ability to recover from a ransomware incident. Additionally, you can implement two-factor authentication for admin accounts. Usually the spread of ransomware or malware is much worse if an admin account has been compromised. So leveraging 2FA will help reduce your risk to that occurring by requiring it for all administrative use. It also can strongly consider using it for regular user accounts as well. Passwords are really no longer a sufficient control, and really you could increase your risk or reduce your risk to a ransomware attack by having 2FA throughout your organization. Implement email controls like sandboxing, sender policy framework, DKIM and DMARC, and regularly perform phishing assessments of your staff. Examine all outbound traffic. It's important that you're looking at your encrypted traffic to ensure that unauthorized transmissions of PII and PCI data is not leaving your network. In a lot of cases with these ransomware incidents, they're not just encrypting your sensitive data, they're also stealing it and then holding that information or posting it, making it available so that it forces you to pay the ransom. Make sure that you train your staff on proper cyber hygiene. Teach them how to recognize phishing attacks, not to connect to unauthorized devices or download content from trusted locations. Make sure that you authorize your incident leader to take critical systems offline under very short notice. It may be important to stop the spread of an attack. And this is really a critical aspect of preventing the spread of ransomware. I know that a lot of organizations are reluctant to impact operations and our members, but these ransomware attacks can be very insidious, and they really need to be contained as quickly as possible. And your incident response team needs to have the authority to be able to take systems offline under very short notice in order to be able to contain those threats. And last but not least, make sure your cyber insurance policy covers ransomware. 94% of ransomware incidents are paid by cyber insurance. Make sure you're covered. While the federal government would prefer you not to pay ransom, and this is no knock towards our friends in the government, ultimately it's the decision of the organization as to whether they should pay a ransom or not. You may have a situation where the data that's been encrypted is not going to be easy to recover, and you may be willing to take the risk of paying that ransom. Make sure that you consult with your insurance carrier. They're going to play a big role in the decision to pay or not to pay. And those payments are typically made through the carrier. So you don't need to go out and buy your own Bitcoin and keep that on a site for a potential ransomware incident. Your insurance carrier will typically handle all that through the forensic company that they've hired to assist you in recovering from a ransomware incident. So if you're attacked with ransomware, I've provided some key steps to take. Detecting and analyzing the attack is the initial focus. You need to understand the scope and impact to the organization. And I've listed a few key things here to look at and consider. Next, you want to make sure you're going to contain the spread of the ransomware so that you can isolate critical systems or departments, or even make decisions to shut down operations. Once you've contained it, you'll want to contact your insurance provider, notify them of the incident, and then they will assign a forensic team to begin working with you. One of the things you really don't want to do, though, unless you absolutely have to, is shutting down or re-imaging systems unless the forensic team has told you to do so. This could be critical for determining whether any additional threats may unknowingly exist, and by rebooting your systems or re-imaging them, that important information could be lost to the forensic team. So make sure that you always consult them before making any decisions as far as the operations of an infected machine go. And last but not least, I'd like to wrap up my presentation by including some resources that will help you with the development of your incident response plan and provide you some further education and steps that you can take to protect your organization. I encourage everyone to review them. They're free. They provide a wealth of information. And that concludes my presentation. I appreciate the valuable time that you spent with us today, and I hope this has proved beneficial for everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raymond. We do have a couple questions on the board for you. The first question, it said, did John say to retire legacy AV audio visual systems? Sorry,
AV, that's my information security background coming into play there. When I meant AV, it's antivirus solutions, old school legacy systems that use blacklists in order to prevent malware and things like that. The new generation of endpoint security solutions use behavior analysis and machine learning, artificial intelligence type of things to detect ransomware events and things like that. And some of them also have the ability to roll your machines back in the event of an encrypted system to a previous known good state, which helps reduce the time that it would take for you to recover.
Very good. Another question, and they kind of go together, Mr. Raymond. We have, what educational awareness tool do you use? And then just kind of want to ask the second one so you can explain. But the second question is, how often do you recommend doing simulated phishing attempts?
So we're not here to promote any specific tools over another, but I will tell you that our organization tends to leverage KnowBe4 for our security awareness education. We conduct monthly phishing assessments of our staff to ensure that they have a good understanding of what a phish looks like or may look like, and are able to recognize and understand that. Outside of phishing assessments, we also do monthly security awareness articles to our staff as well, and conduct annual security awareness training with them.
All right, John, could you tell a little bit about the progression of the program of not having the same phishing standard, how it progressive depending on the education and the response to it? Different levels?
Different levels of complexity?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the reasons we leverage KnowBe4 is it provides different levels of complexity in the phishing emails, some that are much more difficult for our employees to identify, as opposed to some easier ones that may look like, a Pizza Hut coupon or something like that. And, here, click here for a free pizza or whatever. They take a lot more diligence by the employee to review and step through the red flags that may exist within the email. And we provide a template of what we call our phishing rules of thumb, which is essentially red flags for our staff to look for when they're opening any external emails.
Very good. We have a question from Jeff Kelly. It says, can you share the software that has the capability to roll back the system to a previous state if impacted by a security event?
Sure. SentinelOne is one of the applications, endpoint security applications that has that functionality.
All righty. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm just giving it another minute or so. I think I answered all. Well, I didn't answer. You answered all the questions that's been posed at this time. And seeing none other, thank you, Mr. Raymond. Again, I appreciate your time. And everybody, I appreciate you attending. Hope you found it valuable. Recording will be available 2 to 3 days. And wishing you have a wonderful and productive day. Bye.